Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 117, featuring Sebastien, or as he goes by Seb, the CEO and co-founder of Sophon Labs, which is a very interesting blockchain building an ecosystem focused on entertainment applications in gaming, social media, AI, and more. So really excited to have you here, Seb. Thanks for joining. How are you doing today?
Hey man, doing good. Thanks a lot for having me.
Awesome. Joining us from London today. So it's always cool to speak to some friends on the other side of the pond, interesting times in the world. So everyone, thanks for joining us. My name's David Krome. I go by Krome in the metaverse. And this week, as I've said, we're looking at Sophon Labs, which is a really interesting kind of use case for blockchain and crypto, and really looking at kind of on-chain gaming as well as other use cases that are a little bit more kind of real life applications, as opposed to maybe a little bit more of the investor side of the conversation. And here at Web3 Warriors, we always like to look at what we call the creator economy on the blockchain, and the ability for whether it's game developers, whether it's artists, really anybody to take the technology and empower themselves and offer a kind of new level of ownership, a new level of really innovation and creativity in this new era of the blockchain. So thanks again for joining. And really we want to look at the concept of making on-chain apps a little bit more user-friendly and fun. Sophon on their website, which is sophon.xyz, they talk about being a place where simple meets powerful. I thought that was a really interesting way of framing it, because I think those of us who are in the Web3 and blockchain space, we see the power of the kind of peer-to-peer economy, right? And we see the power of the transparency and the accountability that comes with being on the blockchain, right? But often when looking at trying to make that use case and that impact more simple is where things kind of get lost a little bit. And I think one of the main criticisms, for example, of on-chain gaming, as well as some other use cases, even the social media where they're trying to bring in a kind of crypto layer to social media, is that the user experience is just not simple enough and it's not fun enough, right? And I think the flip side of that for the kind of diehard crypto folks is that often when you try to get more simplified, you do also reduce the decentralization of the network, right? And so I think that's always kind of a bit of a balancing act. And so I think what Sophon's doing and the way that they're trying to position themselves in this industry to really take on-chain applications and make them more simple is a very valiant effort. And I think I really look forward to hearing how they plan on doing that. And I think Seb is the best person to have here for that conversation. And we always like to look at, what it is that can actually disrupt current systems that are not really, providing the value that maybe they once did, and in some cases are just becoming much more kind of oppressive and taking away value and not giving value back to the users, right? So with that, thank you again, Seb, for joining us here. Before we kind of jump into Sophon and your mission and vision, everything you're working on, I would love to get just a little bit of background on yourself. What brought you to the blockchain, what brought you to crypto, and then we'll dive into Sophon. So thanks again for joining. You share a bit of background?
Yeah. For sure, man. The first time I used crypto, or kind of when I got in the space, was in the 2017 cycle. At the time, I was working in a bank in Switzerland, which is where I'm from. And I remember buying Ripple. That was the first thing I bought. Someone told me it was like a good token to look at. And I think I bought it around like 0.15 or something. So fairly early. Made some money, and then it was exciting. But that cycle, you were kind of buying tokens, didn't really understand what anything was doing, and didn't make money, didn't lose money, and then kind of forgot about crypto for a while. And the bank that I was working in, my role was as part of a team that was choosing the asset managers that the bank works with. So it was kind of like an analyst role, mainly focused on the equity side. And around 2018, 2019, they started getting interested in crypto asset management, right?
Okay.
A lot of the clients were calling in and they were saying, yeah, we want to have some exposure to BTC, to ETH, how does it work? But we didn't really have products back then you could offer people, right? There was no Bitcoin ETF or no ETH ETF.
That's still relatively new, right? We're only a year in now.
That's right. And so my team started looking into it, and I basically took overall crypto coverage. So then for around year and a half, 2 years, I met most of the asset managers that were trying to give crypto exposure or who were doing hedge funds that was trading crypto. And back then everything was pretty small, right? Like, one of the teams that I was meeting was Grayscale. Another one was Amoon, which is now called 21 Shares. But back then, both of those guys were pretty small. And the more and more I spoke to these guys and, started figuring things out, I decided, okay, crypto is definitely a place that I want to kind of move my career to, right? Or move my professional targets for.
Nice.
So I left the bank in 2020, so during COVID, kind of learned a bit how stuff worked during DeFi summer. And then what was really interesting for me was to join a network. I thought, okay, that's the place that I'm gonna, cut my chops at, and then I'm gonna learn the most. So didn't really know where to start. I joined a network called Nervos, which was a Chinese blockchain that actually raised a huge amount of money in 2018, 2019, like 130 or 140 mil, if I remember correctly, from Sequoia and some others.
Wow.
And I joined to kind of help build out the DeFi ecosystem, and did that for around a year and a half. And then in 2022, I started reevaluating stuff, and I was like, okay, Ethereum communities where most of the builders are, that's where most of the innovation's happening. It seems like a good place to be. But ETH had its problems. It was still a proof of work network back then. And, people were starting to build layer twos. So I researched it a bit and I figured out, okay, there's two ways to do these layer twos. There's optimistic rollups and there's ZK rollups. And optimistic rollups had started shipping, Optimism existed already back then, but ZK was really the thing that was going to solve Ethereum's problems, right? It was going to come in and it was this hot, sexy technology that was going to solve everything. So I said, okay, I'm going to...
For our listeners, I just want to clarify quick. ZK is zero knowledge, right? Zero knowledge proofs and
that's
new use case. So just for any listeners, you can go Google that, zero knowledge. You'll see what that's all about. Sorry to interrupt there.
No worries, man. Yeah, ZK is it's a type of cryptography that is used to verify transactions on chain. And so I was like, okay, ZK is the next big thing. How is this going to work? So I started looking into who's building ZK L2s, and there were only a couple teams back then, right? There was Starkware, there was Matter Labs, Polygon. They acquired the Hermes team. And Scroll really wasn't much of a thing back then, so those were the main guys. And I figured, okay, did some more research, and Matter Labs is probably the team that I thought had the best engineering and was the most ETH aligned. So I did what I had to do to meet them, and they hired me as their head of DeFi, and stayed there for around 2 years. And then last year, which is when I left, what happened is, okay, by then a lot had happened, right? Now, all these layer twos had become very sophisticated, very advanced in their tech roadmaps, and they were starting to open source their code bases. So basically, for people who are, your listeners who are non-technical, what that means is these engineering companies were taking their product, their engineering products, and saying to people, hey, here you can take it, and you can basically build your own product using our technology. So it's kind of like saying, okay, we developed a new type of wood to build houses, and my wood's better than your metal. And now my wood is now available for everybody to use, and you can go and build your own houses with it.
That's it. Shout out to open source. That's what's up.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought, okay, well, this is pretty interesting, because the tech is becoming pretty commoditized, and that means there's an opportunity to actually take this technology and focus it on specific use cases, because the reality is a lot of these big engineering companies that build out all of this technology, they're engineering companies, right? And they're built and they're run by engineers, and they kind of have this generalized feel to them, and they were not really differentiating themselves. No specific use cases, wasn't really targeted or tailored. They were just building out this tech and kind of saying to people, okay, well, whoever wants can come and use it, and we'll see what happens.
Right.
But the value is now I can get this, and I can build actually a consumer facing product or interface, and be much more business oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So that seemed like a really good opportunity to just go in and basically take the technology that was easy to use, and then put my business acumen, my network, and the way I see the world on top of it. And that's what I decided to do with Sophon, right? Because there's a clear mismatch with net new users coming into crypto, right? Because you need to be empathetic with people who are not in this space yet and understand how they use technology, how their habits around technology are formed. This is something an engineer doesn't really understand, right? Because
makes sense, yeah.
they're much too into it. So we set out to do that last year. We raised a $10 million seed round, which was already like quite a success.
Yeah.
But then we went further than that, and we did a note sale where we raised approximately 21,000 ETH, which at the time was roughly 65 mil. And then we started building Sophon, and we launched the mainnet around 3 months ago in December 18th to be precise. And everything's been going great ever since. I think this week we crossed the 50 million transaction mark, which is fantastic. It's
congratulations,
incredibly big number to have done in the first 3 months. And the product is growing. The teams building with us are growing, and that's my path so far.
That's some awesome background, man. Thank you for sharing that. And I think there's a lot of interesting lessons kind of packed in there, not the least of which is, you made the choice that you saw the future in crypto, you saw the future in this technology, and you made an actual hard pivot, from the banking industry into this kind of blockchain and crypto space, right? Which is amazing. And then being so kind of intentional about each step that you make there, right? From the Matter Labs, and then, leaving and being able to provide and build Sophon. And then what you were saying about the open source is really clutch, right? And I think that's such a huge piece of it, because to your point, the engineers are geniuses, they innovate, they disrupt, but when it comes to the market and it comes to the actual use case and making this kind of sticky for your average user out there, that's not necessarily their strong suit, right? So what would you say is kind of the mission and vision of Sophon? I have it up on the screen here. We're looking at a lot of the kind of highlights, and where it says where simple meets powerful, and then discover more together. And I like the idea of the new era of culture, so I want to deep dive into that a little bit as well. But I would love to just hear kind of at a high level, what would you say is kind of the main mission and vision of Sophon?
For us, the objective is very simple. We want to be the place that builders and non-crypto users go to use the next version of the internet, right? Like, we really believe that crypto is this upgraded version of the internet, where you can own everything that you're building, or you can own your data, or you own your userhood, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to be the place that facilitates this. And I think that starts by having a really focused and empathetic attitude towards the end users that you have. So what does that mean? That means, so far in crypto, most of the people in the space are kind of early adopters of technology. There may be engineers, or they're devs, or they're curious people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of gotten to the end of that bucket, right? Most of those people in the world who are interested in being an early adopter of tech or that sort of thing, like, they're in this space, right? We've onboarded them. So then, what does that mean? That means that the next wave of people is like the mass market wave, right? But those folks, they interact with technology in a completely different way. They're less tech advanced, less tech curious, and that's completely fine.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to get those people on chain, we need to think and observe, how do those people use technology? How are their existing habits around daily uses of tech, whether it's Netflix, or using your Uber or your Whoop or whatever. How does all of that work? How are people consuming this? And then bring those habits and bring that intuition into a crypto setting. And that kind of starts by the visual side. And that's what, when you go to Sophon, you can see an incredible design. We put a lot of effort into design there to make an experience that look and feels very intuitive for the end user. And I think that's where it starts.
Amazing. Yeah, for sure. And the idea of basically speaking to what the crypto world calls normies, right? Like your standard average user of technology, and being able to kind of pitch it in a way that is exciting for them. So what's kind of an initial use case that you found kind of the most success with, and how are you kind of taking this to market? I know there was an announcement I saw on your LinkedIn with Binance buying in, and some support and partnership with Binance there, and so it seems like you're growing a lot in the crypto ecosystem. Is there an actual specific kind of go-to-market use case for those non-adopters, those people out there that you think is going to be the most kind of sticky that you're working on, or is it kind of just the platform's there and we want to support any and all projects that are kind of with this kind of goal in mind? Or do you have a specific kind of project that's already launched and is being used out there?
So the way I think about it is twofold. There's what we can build internally, and then there's the external partners or parties that are building with us. So let's talk a little bit about the internal part.
Okay.
At the moment, when you're running a network, most of the pieces of the network are completely distributed. That means the wallet, the trading interface, and the way that the user is onboarded is very fragmented, right? There's a piece to do every single thing, and it's this whole user or toolbox that's very confusing for new people. In the Web2 space, when you're using a new tool, you usually have this one front end that you interact with, and everything is there. And that feels safe, it feels comfortable, it feels familiar, it feels intuitive. So the first stop for us was to just reskin the way that people have their first interaction with crypto. And that means building an account. Instead of having this concept of wallets, we want people to have this concept of accounts, because that's something that they already understand. So you log on, you create your Sophon account. There's a private public key part to this, of course. So for the crypto natives, they'll understand that. But when you log on to Sophon, you're creating an account using your Google account or your passkey. And after that, you log into the Sophon home. And the Sophon home is kind of where everything starts. It's this discoverability page. It houses your account, your rewards, your loyalty, your badges, everything that you've built into your account. So we kick off from there. And then there's different things that you can start to do. There's the Sophon loyalty program, which has this sort of social composability between the different applications building on Sophon. And that lives in the Sophon home. And then there's the Sophon Data Hub. And the Sophon Data Hub is, we can talk a little bit about that later on in the podcast, but that houses all of the different kinds of data points that the user will share with the Sophon account. And remind me to talk more about this later.
Okay.
And then on the external part, you want your partners to be leveraging all of this front end, right? This one-stop shop that the user logs into. And so we push to have very deep integrations with our partners, right? We're not trying to onboard 100 different partners to have a light touch. We want them to have these very deep integrations with the Sophon home and really leverage the Sophon home, the Sophon account, the loyalty program, the data hub. And you start to create a very deeply embedded ecosystem that you can present to the end user. And I think that's a great way to kind of spark the attention and keep the attention of people who've never really used crypto before.
Nice.
Because you're creating this user experience that looks and feels like something they're used to.
Okay, that's cool. And so the improving the UX, definitely your website is very pretty. I recommend everyone check it out at sophon.xyz, and it does hit on a lot of the kind of key points that you've been mentioning so far here. And so how does that work, I guess, would be my next question. Like, is it an EVM compatible chain? Is it just kind of really its own out of the box solution? I know you mentioned the Sophon ZK, which you mentioned earlier. You kind of utilized open source, ZK stuff that was available and built it into this platform, into your ecosystem here. So I guess just for the techie people in the audience, just a little bit more nuts and bolts about, how does it work, and is it kind of EVM parallel or very much its own layer one? What's the nuts and bolts of it there?
Yeah, so it's a Validium. It's rolling up on, or not rolling up, but using Ethereum.
Okay.
It's its own sovereign blockchain. It's a layer 2.
Okay.
We're using Avail as our data availability partner, and we're generating zero knowledge proofs to verify transactions. The big advantage that we have is that we're using this ZK Sync code base, and it allows you to. It has native account abstraction that's baked into the network. So that means we can do some really cool things, like have these custom paymasters. So at the moment, there's no gas costs on Sophon. Everything is sponsored by the foundation. This is part of our go-to-market strategy. It also allows you to have to log in with your account just using your Gmail or your passkey, right? And the user experience becomes very sexy and very similar to something that people are used to using on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, and when you said go to market, right, with low gas, do you see a scenario where kind of like the Polygon dilemma, where as you scale up, the gas inevitably does have to go up a little bit, and then is that all just kind of part of the roadmap? It's not something where the gas will all of a sudden get much higher and then be kind of make things more difficult for the developers that are working on your blockchain, or you've already kind of prepared for that and you're not concerned about gas getting out of control?
Actually, the way that the ZK Sync code base functions is you don't really have gas fluctuations.
Right.
So when activity goes up, you're actually just queuing the transactions at the RPC, but they're not. You don't have gas wars that are happening. So that's actually a pretty sexy feature of how the network's built.
Yeah, that's pretty epic. That's good. That makes sense. And I guess that's one of the value of the ZK for sure. And then you were saying kind of having a lot of that built natively into it. So looking at the nodes then, how do the nodes function, and is it easy for people to get involved, or is it what does it look like? What's the pitch to the community for maybe those who might want to mine or might want to be part of this solution as it's evolving?
So the node sale, the initial pitch when we did the node sale was we're earmarking 20% of total token supply as rewards for the nodes over the next 36 months. So immediately that became like a semi-liquid option that folks were taking on Sophon. So people who bought nodes when we did the node sale last year, they're saying, okay, I'm getting into Sophon at this lower valuation, and I'm long the Sophon token and the Sophon project before it's come out, right?
Nice.
And so 20% of total token supply over 36 months. Next, for me as a founder, it's very important that the node holders always get value, because they kind of represent the core community of the Sophon project. And trying to always push additional value to those guys is the best way for us to grow our community. It's the best form of marketing, right? Because they were making your early investors successful. So projects that build natively on Sophon, we always negotiate them airdropping part of their token supply to the node holders as a reward. Because we raised a lot of money, we don't really need this money now for us as a foundation. So instead of keeping these funds for ourselves, we actually pass them on to the node holders. And then what do the node holders actually have to do? So at the moment, what they're doing is they're um, securing our data availability network. They're securing the Avail network by performing data sampling via light nodes. And you can either do it on your own, or you can delegate to a third-party node provider, and they do it on your behalf for a small fee. Further into the year, most likely, once Matter Labs decentralizes the sequencer and comes up with its consensus mechanism, then those nodes will actually be able to help decentralize Sophon as well. That's like the main use case, right?
Nice. And so you did mention that node sale went quite successfully, and so I imagine you sold out, right? And or is there a limit, or do the nodes keep kind of building on themselves?
No, it was a sellout.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And so at this point, the nodes are all operational. You're not in the business of expanding right now, and it's just a matter of building and, like you said, kind of rewarding the developers that are, kind of your first builders on the Sophon network, right? That's where right. A lot of the revenue is going. Wow, that's amazing. Well, congrats on the sellout. I think that's huge. And, how important do you think it is, that you kind of came from this trajectory of, being at the bank is one thing. We do hear that a lot with some of the higher end kind of developers and business owners in the space. But then, being able to go through kind of the DeFi difficulties of the 2017 to 19, and then seeing those markets shake up, and then having a seed round and working with the Matter Labs that you were talking about. How important do you think all of that was to ultimately getting to this place where you got the $10 million in seed funding, but then you had a very successful node launch, and now you're continuing to build on that? How important was all of those kind of experiences in kind of succeeding here in the Sophon space now?
They were hugely important. I mean, it's part of my path, right? It's my story, and everyone has their path. But for me, it's the path that I've been on so far, and each of those experiences really contributed to bringing me where I am today in my life. I mean, when I was working in the bank, I learned a huge amount about how financial markets work, but I really hated it at the end. Like I hated the life of working in a bank, of wearing a suit every day, this sort of corporate lifestyle. And I was super down about it. Like I hated it. So for me, it became clear I got to get out of this, and I have to be working on something that I find challenging, interesting. I wanted to be in an industry that had high growth potential, that was a little bit risky. So that brought me to crypto, right? And that was a formative experience. And then in crypto, it's not like in other jobs or in other careers where you can have a friend who kind of like introduces you to a company, and you kind of get in and you use your network to get your foot in the door. In crypto, it's very meritocratic, right? Like everybody who's here, it's by choice.
Yeah.
Because naturally even back then you were taking a risk on the industry, and there was no plug me ins, like very, very meritocratic. So yeah, at the beginning I didn't know that much, and I had to fake it till I made it. I had to hustle. And it's quite humbling to really have to hustle your butt off to get your foot in the door, and to build up a network that's entirely anonymous most of the time, that's on Telegram. It's hard to get in. So over time you build it up, and I think working at Matter Labs was great because it gave me a very deep technical understanding of how blockchains function at the core level. And I became kind of an ambassador for ZK Tech through my role at Matter Labs as well, because even though we were like a business team, we had a very deep, I think we were the most technical business team on the market, to be honest.
Nice.
We had a very, very good technical understanding of how stuff we were selling worked, basically. And obviously transitioning to becoming a founder, that was very important, right? That gave investors a lot of confidence that I would be able to build a team around this and ship my vision.
Awesome. No, that's pretty impressive, man. Congratulations, honestly, that you've made it this far. And, in 6-7 years, it's a relatively short kind of professional trajectory to get to this level of success. So kudos to you, man. It's really, really impressive.
Thank you.
On the node piece, and I just scrolled down and saw this currency of culture. I like the way you're framing culture, by the way, and we're going to tap on that soon as well. But I'm wondering about the Soph token. So is this something that is publicly available, or is it a reward system specifically for your node operators and developers that are in the ecosystem? Can you share a little bit about the token and how that works?
So the token is out, but it's entirely owned by the foundation right now.
Gotcha.
And so there is no price for it. And that's we're just using it for sponsoring gas on the chain. Relatively soon, probably towards the end of the quarter or beginning of Q2, is when we're going to list the token. And then we'll start, the token will have a price. We will unlock the token for the node holders and folks who farm the token as well on our points farm. And that will kind of be the way that we kick off the life of the token.
Very cool. And some lucky early farmers will maybe take a small payout and hold the rest. Who knows? Who knows what'll happen there?
Let's see.
That's very cool, though. Very cool, man. So I noticed that there was some mention of AI, and I guess you're integrating artificial intelligence probably in all different kinds of ways in the back end. But I did want to just kind of pick your brain a little bit, as someone who's very aware of the developer side of things as well as kind of the real life application focus of Sophon. How is artificial intelligence kind of changing the game when it comes to the adoption conversation, and how are you using it at Sophon?
So I always come back to this interview that I saw a couple months ago of Jeff Bezos, where he was talking about Amazon and AI. And the interviewer asks him, how much of Amazon is processes or business lines have AI baked into it? And Bezos replies, 95% of what we're doing on Amazon has AI into it. And the reason is because AI is such an industrial revolution. It's like the introduction of electricity or the internet, where it's not that some businesses use the electricity or the internet, everything will use it. And he was of the opinion that going into the future, it's not that some businesses will have AI or some won't. Everything will have some form of AI working in the business, right? Whether it's training data that your business generates, whether it's optimizing parts of your business, it will always be there. So that means that Sophon, had to become involved in the crypto AI space early on. So what we did is we launched an initiative called the SIA, the Sophon Intelligence Agency, nice. Based around, and that's basically a builder program to fund AI agent frameworks, trading, and projects. So we earmarked around, I think it's $5 million in total from our treasury to support this. And yeah, we welcome all kinds of builders to work with us to do this.
Nice. Are you at all in the kind of AML and transaction monitoring side of things? I'm just curious because I feel like that's a use case that I'm seeing. I work in fintech in my day job, but that I've been seeing around as far as very obvious use case for AI, where you've got all kinds of insane amounts of false positives in the kind of traditional antiquated system, and AI ideally maybe can come through and monitor transactions a little bit more efficiently and with less false positives, right, on flagging transactions that maybe don't need to be flagged. Do you see that kind of use case in the crypto space? Like, do you think that when it comes to like security measures, and I mean that's probably a major concern you hear from the people who haven't quite adopted crypto yet, right, is they're worried about the scams, they're worried about the lack of security, or that their wallet could get drained, or whatever the case might be. Do you think that AI is going to play an important role kind of in that security side of things, whether on the institutional level with AML or even on the kind of customer level with just general wallet security and hygiene?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're building with machines, it's always about what can the machine do and not being able to trick the machine. And when it comes to KYC or AML or working with money, people are always very creative in figuring out how to cheat the system. So
It
I
does.
think we're still a while away for machines to be able to perform all of these tasks. When you're using KYC software now, something like SumSub, for instance, you're using you're using image recognition or machine recognition to scan your ID and
Right.
then take a picture of your face, and it's comparing whether this is really you or not. And if there's a degree of uncertainty, then it prompts you to have to fix something. But for most people, it works pretty well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good example. But a complete reliance on these tools, I think we're a while away. For Sophon, we don't have a huge focus on this. We do care about users and not getting rugged or not having poor experiences. So the chain for the time being is permissioned, which means that all of the applications building on Sophon have to be approved and vetted by us, right? And that allows us to work exclusively with teams that we have a lot of confidence in, where we know the team, we know the founder, what they're building, and it avoids having bad surprises on the network and bitter endings for users.
Okay. So, and with that, obviously, as of right now, you're not quite at the decentralized network effect. You're still at very much a bit of a centralized operation, and with intention, though, right? With the idea of being very intentional about how the blockchain and the programming is being used, essentially, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean every layer 2 is centralized.
Yeah,
There isn't a decentralized layer 2.
Right.
And then something like Solana is arguable how decentralized it is because there's not that many validators. So
yeah, I do hear that.
The only really decentralized chains are ETH and BTC.
ETH and BTC. All right. I was going to ask you about that, because I was curious. And then when you mentioned how it is a layer 2, a sovereign layer 2, and how you're still kind of being EVM compatible, that's amazing. And I think to your point, yeah, layer 2s will all have some type of point of centralization. And I think you're doing it in a very intentional way to kind of grow out a network with a purpose, right? And I can see kind of the use case that you're going for there. So tangential to the AI conversation is the data conversation, right? And I think that often the ethos of Web3 is getting lost. And I've, come into this space in 2020, 2021, a little bit disillusioned with the traditional kind of social media and app economics as it is, where they're basically taking your data and they're using that data to monetize themselves. So when I look at Web3, and whether it's in the social media space or the gaming space or anywhere really, I would hope that Web3 is ushering in an era of kind of data ownership and an understanding of how your data is being used. If not owning it completely, at least having very clear transparency around how your data is being used. How is Sophon kind of handling that data conversation? And then you did mention the data hub earlier, which you can kind of dive into after. But I'm curious, do you agree that Web3 can usher in kind of this new layer or this new sense of data sovereignty and kind of do away with some of the, what I call data vampires of the traditional Web2 space?
Oh, definitely. It's definitely something that we're doing, and we're using a technology called zk-TLS for that. And what it does is it's basically generating proofs of your activity or your data using a Web2 application. But that proof is then being, it's representing your data, but in a way that's private. So only parts of the data are visible, or it can be queried by folks wanting to have access to it. But we're not sharing, it's not sharing your name or personal information. Nice. Like this. And that's what we do with the Data Hub. So what the Data Hub does is it allows you to share via your Sophon account different kinds of data sources that you would have based on your day-to-day consumption habits. And I think that's a great way to get net new users into crypto by kind of leveraging the existing habits that they have. So whether it's your Uber account, your Ticketmaster account, your chess.com account, your Steam account, all of these things can be used to share data with the data hub, and then kind of offer rewards or loyalty or social validation in return. I think that's a really nice way to get new people on chain, because if you're offering the same user experience that people are used to in a Web2 setting, they will try this out. And if you give people the opportunity to, hey, here's this thing, you've never heard of it before, it's called Sophon. You log in, you make an account, create with your Gmail, easy. Then you go in and you can share some of your data, but you know that it's been protected and you're going to get a reward for it. Why would you not do this?
Yeah, that's solid.
Easy, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a great way to get net new users in. And if then the partners that are building in the network are leveraging this, and then they say, hey, I want, this guy likes UFC. He's been to a UFC competition before. And I can see that, I don't know, he likes to order McDonald's or something. Maybe my project, my prediction market or something will be of interest for him. Let me send him, $5 worth of tokens to come and check it out. Nice. This is exactly how advertising works, right? Mm-hmm. The commodity of the 21st century is data. And I really think that using that as an onboarding mechanism for people who've never used crypto before, as long as you're offering them a user experience that's equivalent to what they're used to, this concept of having a platform, which is something that people understand, you're going to get them hooked.
Yeah, that makes sense. So on one hand, the data internally in the Sophon ecosystem can be kind of used by developers and tailor-made, and you're asking for the user's approval, and if they approve, you give them rewards. So that's a really cool kind of very Web3 way of handling data. And then the idea that, to your other point, when developers, want a certain data set, everyone who loves UFC, for example, according to the data set we have, and we want to airdrop a certain token to them. This is like direct marketing in a way that's like just kind of unheard of in the traditional ads space, right? It's like maybe the closest thing you can think of is like loyalty points, or, buy here and get a little bit of, reward points on your Starbucks card or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so I've heard you talk about that loyalty and rewards angle a lot. So how much is that kind of important to Sophon kind of succeeding? And is this a scenario where the reward is going to be the Soph token for the users as well? Or is that a different type of different token that you'll have, like a different governance token or something?
It's a variety of things. It can be using our token to incentivize things. It can be to reward the loyalty or the repetition that people have, either from the data that they're sharing. So if you've got someone who's using Uber every day, or who's been to 10 Eminem concerts. Actually, Eminem concerts is a bad example because he doesn't do concerts anymore. But actually, a good example would be something like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, the huge fan base, primarily women. Most likely, a lot of those ladies, they're not into crypto, right? It's not really what's attracting them now. But if I go and I say, hey, here's, the biggest Taylor Swift fans are getting these incredible rewards on the Sophon platform. And people will be interested in this, right? People will want to go get those rewards. And on the flip side, you're going to have access to accounts or users where you've proven, for a fact that they are very into a particular thing, in this case, Taylor Swift. And that's very valuable to products and services that are building on Sophon, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's maybe the ticketing companies that we're working with, some social things, there's different kinds of examples, right? And I think that's going to be the onboarding moment.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's awesome. So what I'm hearing is, on one hand, you're empowered to make the choice if you want to give your data to Sophon. On the other hand, you're also being rewarded for the data that you're giving to Sophon, and even the data that you do take is being used essentially internally to the ecosystem of Sophon, and not something you're maybe taking to market and selling the way a Facebook does, for example. So a very different kind of profit model, but still very much seeing the value in data. And as you rightly claim, that is kind of the commodity of the 21st century, as it were, and that's where we're going. So I know we're getting close to that 1 hour mark. I want to respect your time. I am curious about your thoughts on on-chain gaming specifically. There's a lot about creators and culture on your website, and the idea that Sophon is built for creators. So I really love that angle, and I want to see on-chain gaming succeed. Frankly, I launched this podcast over 3 years ago now, really talking about the value of blockchain for gamers, but I soon realized how much gamers don't want to hear that pitch at all. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on on-chain gaming and where we're at and where we're kind of going as we kind of wind down here.
Yeah, man. I think it's because it just hasn't been executed in the right way yet. There's a game launching on Sophon in Q2. It's a mobile game that comes from well, I can't say what the game is yet, but basically they're building using Beam as well, which is one of our core partners, they're one of the largest sort of entertainment or gaming DAOs or investors in the space. The game that's coming to build with us, it's a mobile game that's existed for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. They've done 350 million downloads on the Apple Store.
Awesome.
And Google Play Store. They have around 2 million monthly active users. And the founder's been in the mobile gaming space for 2 decades. So these guys, they know their shit, right? They know how mobile gaming works. And this founder, he's just saying, play to earn works if you do it correctly. And so he took a risk to re-engineer this new version of the game, basically, to use crypto. And it starts slow. It starts with just rewards, ownership of assets in the game, things like this, and you can over time build it up. I think if you take a game like this that already has product market fit, it already has a very big user base. I don't need, we don't need to convince anybody to use this game because they already have a ton of users.
Nice.
And you introduce crypto to it very slowly in a way that functions. If that works, the next 12 months, every mobile game is going to say, hey, wait a minute, I got to do this too.
Yeah, once it works and the use case is sticky and it's actually driving traffic to the app, that's going to be the next level, the game changer, I think. But to your point, even with the current, even keeping the current track kind of community that they have and rewarding that community better, getting more buy-in, and then that hopefully would lead to network effect and people bragging about all these rewards they got in their game, and that's the hope.
I really think play to earn works very well, and I'll leave you with a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a concept that I talk about sometimes when I'm doing public speaking. It's the difference between PvP and PvE environments when you're building a business. And let's take the last 6 to 9 months in crypto have been largely dominated by trading meme coins or shit coins, right?
Yeah.
And stuff on stuff launching on Pump Fund on Solana.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the other side, take the largest speculative market in the world, which is arguably the lottery, right? It's existed for a long time. People play the lottery all around. It doesn't really matter like where you're from, your religion, what color you are. Like people all around the world play the lottery, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's the lottery or the scratch cards, things like this. Now, the lottery is something that people play on a regular basis. It's a repeat action from people who play it. Even though statistically they know that they're going to lose, they're still trying again, and they're never upset at it.
That's a good point.
Nobody plays a scratch card, doesn't get the payout, and thinks, oh fuck, I'm never playing the lottery again. This is bullshit. It's the last time. Then you go PvP, like buying a meme coin on that launched on Pump Fund, for instance, statistically, you are probably around the same winning odds, right?
Yeah.
But so people will lose, but the reaction is totally different, you know? Then they're like, fuck this. The KOL who told me to buy, I'm never doing it again. I hate it.
Yeah.
This is it. It's finished. And they're both, odds are relatively the same. Both actions are relatively the same, but the outcome or the feeling for the person is completely different, right? And I think it's very important to think about things in a PvE way, where people are coming in with less expectation. They're just wanting to spend money to have fun, rather than the meme coin stuff where people are thinking like, oh, I'm going to change my life and I'm going to retire if I just click one more time, right? That's that's an unhealthy mindset. Whereas, hey, I'm going to spend $10 playing this game that I love, or buying this item in the game that I love. It's fun. And I think people do this already in games, right? People spend money, whether it's playing FIFA or in Call of Duty or World of Warcraft.
100%.
People spend money, right? But this money is very synthetic. It doesn't really exist.
Exactly.
And crypto gives you such a nice opportunity to actually materialize this money. I do really think that folks will earn a living playing games using, in-game item, not like streaming, right?
Yeah,
but actually
not just the Twitch
the
streamers.
items in the games. Yeah, but I really do think so. I really think that in the future that's going to happen.
And I think even the Twitch streamers have such an awesome opportunity right now to use blockchain, frankly, to kind of cut out Twitch and find ways to actually get support from their community without taking like 40% to the platform that they're streaming on. So there's that whole conversation too. But yeah, no, you're right. And I think we're getting to that place where there will be a little bit more expectation of it. And the way I've been framing it is just bringing real world value into the digital world. Like, we've all been paying into these video games, but once you buy it and you have the asset in that world, it's no longer real world money. It's just the game money, and you can't take it out unless you find a way to skirt around their rules, and then they get mad at you or whatever. But generally, there's no real world value in the digital world outside of crypto, and I think it's a no-brainer for the gamers out there. But we'll get there, and I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out for that project that you're mentioning. So 2-3 months out, we'll definitely want to try out that mobile game. And I have been seeing it in the mobile space more than other spaces, where they are kind of dipping their toes into some layer 2 crypto options where it's very quiet and kind of in the background. But I look forward to seeing how Sophon's doing it. So thank you so much. I did want to get into a little bit of the real world asset conversation, but maybe we'll save that for another conversation, and people can probably glean how that's going to kind of be applied in the Sophon world and as an L2. So really cool. Is there anything else you want to just kind of pitch to our listeners? Any call to action as far as how they can get involved with Sophon, or what we should be looking out for?
Yeah, head on to sophon.xyz, like you said at the start of the show. Give me a follow on Twitter. I don't know if you can link that in the show notes.
Yeah,
and follow Sophon, just SOPHON on Twitter, on X. And yeah, expect a lot of cool stuff to come out the next few months.
Nice. There you go. Follow Sophon on Twitter. What's your Twitter, just for the listeners, quick?
It's 0x Sebastien A.
There you go. 0x Sebastien A on Twitter. Thank you so much, Seb. This is a really, really cool application. Wishing you the best of success, continued success for Sophon. And we'll be watching, and I look forward to getting more involved in the ecosystem. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, we'll catch you all in the metaverse. Peace out. Pew, pew.
Peace out.